Ladies and gentlemen and colleagues, I think we'll begin now for our meeting. Just a couple of quick announcements before we begin. There will be votes this evening. Everyone is aware of that. My understanding, the bells will commence ringing at 5:45, which will interrupt our second hour of examination on Subs B. What I would recommend to the committee, we continue to sit until 6 p.m., and that will give us at least an hour and a half to deal with Subs B and still 15 minutes to get from this room down to the House of Commons. So if I don't hear any objections, that's how we'll proceed. Minister Foote, thank you for being with us. Welcome once again to our committee. Today's meeting is to discuss in the first hour the continuing study on the Phoenix payroll system. The second hour and a half will be discussions with the Department of Public Works and Government Services on their Subs B. And with that very brief introduction, Minister, you know how this committee operates. Welcome once again, and the floor is yours for your opening statement.
Well, thank you for the invitation to be here. And I welcome this opportunity, but before I do so, I'd like to maybe have those who are accompanying me today introduce themselves, starting with my immediate right.
Ron Parker, President of Shared Services Canada.
Hello, John Glowacki, COO, Shared Services Canada.
Alain Duplantis, CFO at Shared Services Canada.
Immediate left. Bonjour.
Marie Lemay, je suis la sous-ministre à Services publics et approvisionnement Canada.
Marie Lemay, Deputy Minister at Public Services and Procurement Canada.
Canada.
Marty Muldoon, Chief Financial Officer, PSPC.
Thank you. So it is a privilege for me to be here to update the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates on the Phoenix pay system, as I had committed to do during my last appearance. I'm also pleased to participate in the committee's review of the Supplementary Estimates B for both Public Services and Procurement Canada and Shared Services Canada. Allow me to repeat, as I have done many times, that it is completely unacceptable for any employee to not receive the pay they earn. I have been seized with this issue since pay problems first emerged, and fixing the government's pay system is a top priority. Public service pay is complex and unique. There is no other pay system in the country with almost 300,000 employees across 101 departments, with 27 collective agreements and 80,000 business rules. The planning of Phoenix and the broader pay transformation initiative was flawed. But casting blame doesn't help public servants facing frustrating pay delays. They need solutions. When I was made aware of the extent of the problem, I took early and decisive action. Many measures have been put in place since late spring to address pay issues and support our employees. I announced the creation of a satellite unit in Gatineau to immediately begin working on the backlog. Over the summer, we added and staffed 3 additional satellite offices in Shawinigan, Winnipeg, and Montreal to provide additional support. I committed to keeping these offices until the backlog is eliminated and issues are resolved. We've taken several steps to better support employees. We established a new call center and a Phoenix feedback form to make it easier for employees to reach us and to report pay problems. We communicate regularly about the availability of emergency salary advances for these employees affected by pay problems. We also provide regular updates to media and employees on our progress. On the training front, we updated our materials for managers and employees and made more information available on our website. We also provided targeted training sessions to human resources advisors on how to effectively work with Phoenix. The department implemented system enhancements to improve how Phoenix functions and to increase automation. Finally, we have worked closely with all of our partners. The Treasury Board Secretariat put in place a claims process to repay employees who have incurred costs related to pay issues, such as interest charges. The Canada Revenue Agency has information on their website and a 1-800 number for employees concerned about the tax implications of pay issues. And we continue to collaborate with unions on a number of fronts, including a recent agreement to have government IT specialists help enhance Phoenix. These measures have allowed us to make significant progress, but more needs to be done. Let me turn now to our efforts going forward. When I last updated the committee, my officials and I discussed our goal to eliminate the backlog of approximately 82,000 employee pay cases by the end of October. Despite our best efforts, we could not completely eliminate the entire backlog, and to date, we have closed the cases of 83% of employees in the backlog. The majority of cases left in the backlog predate Phoenix. These are complex cases that require time-consuming manual calculations. We are seeing cases that date back several years and involve multiple transactions. For example, when dealing with a retirement, it is common to first have to close several related pay transactions, such as salary incremental increases, actings, and promotions. And once all of these files are closed, there are additional transactions needed, such as termination payments and severance payments, before a final payment to an employee can be issued. This process can be very lengthy, where we are dealing with old files and the verification of salary and other amounts is required. As of today, approximately 15,000 public servants still remain in the backlog. It is important to note that these cases involve supplementary pay. That said, missing pay of any sort is concerning and a priority that must be addressed. These remaining cases are being handled by a dedicated group of expert compensation advisors, and our goal is to process them as quickly as possible. During my last appearance, I also spoke about reaching a steady state, where pay transactions are processed efficiently, consistently, and with minimal errors. We are now seeing much higher rates of productivity in our pay offices. Users have become more accustomed to the system, and incoming pay requests are now processed more quickly and efficiently. For example, in May, we processed about 40,000 pay transactions. However, in September and October, that number increased to approximately 100,000 transactions each month. The dip in processing productivity after Phoenix was implemented had an impact on the caseload being carried in the pay system. For a period of time, we received more transactions than we could address. Because of this situation, we had to refine our plan to reach steady state, which includes the following 3 elements: a concentrated expert team to eliminate the backlog, a prioritized approach for the timely processing of cases in or entering the pay system, and a process of validation and improvement. This plan considers productivity rates, incoming work, the availability of employees, and other variables. It also prioritizes cases that may cause employee financial hardships or have tax implications, namely those with disability claims, returning from leave, terminations, and new hires. A key lesson taken from the Phoenix experience has been the need to consult widely and validate. This is why I have told my department to review the plan and its assumptions with other client departments, employees, and unions. This focus on validation will ensure we have a robust and reliable go-forward approach. Many good ideas on how to improve the pay system have come from our frontline compensation advisors. Steady state won't happen tomorrow, but we are seeing progress. The processing times for certain transactions have already improved. For example, overtime is now processed automatically once entered and approved in the system. Much of the discussion around Phoenix has focused on software, but at the heart of our pay system are people, those using the system and those depending on it for their pay. In our Public Service Pay Center in Miramichi, which I visited again this month for the 3rd time, we are currently training our next generation of compensation advisors. A few weeks ago, the department welcomed a new class of 91 recruits who have started the 1-year training program that will give them the skills needed to work at the Pay Center. The program ensures the presence of a constant pool of qualified compensation experts. And at this point, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair, I really would like to acknowledge the hard work of the employees in Miramichi. They are dedicated, committed, and are working so hard on a daily basis to make a difference. As the year-end approaches, we are acutely aware that employees who are not paid correctly are worried about tax implications. Public Services and Procurement Canada is working closely with the Treasury Board Secretariat, the revenue agencies, and the unions to minimize the potential for problems and to ensure that employees have the information they need. Employees can visit the CRA website or contact their call centre for general inquiries about taxes. Employees looking for information on their T4 slips can contact the Phoenix call centre. There is a significant effort underway to support employees experiencing pay issues. If employees have been overpaid, these amounts will be recovered over multiple pay periods to lessen the impact. We are working directly with employees facing financial hardship to identify other payment arrangements if needed. And those who have incurred out-of-pocket expenses as a result of missing pay can seek reimbursement through a Treasury Board Secretariat claims process. I understand and I appreciate this has been a very difficult situation, and I appreciate as well the patience of everyone whose pay has been affected. Thank you to the staff who are working so hard to process pay transactions. On my most recent visit to the Pay Centre in Miramichi, I heard from employees about the progress being made and the challenges that still remain. This team is dedicated to helping their colleagues across the government, and I express to them my support and gratitude. There are important lessons to be learned from this experience, and that is why I called the Auditor General of Canada to do a full review of the Phoenix project. In the meantime, I have put on hold plans to transition additional departments to the Pay Centre. The government needed a new pay system. However, the planning of Phoenix and the broader pay transformation initiative was driven by cuts instead of service. The former government sought annual savings of $78 million at the expense of employees. Mr. Chair, I don't need to convince anyone that Phoenix should have been better planned and implemented. Pay transformation was compromised as soon as the decision was taken to eliminate the jobs of some 700 compensation staff before we had transitioned to Phoenix. Had those jobs been kept longer, we would not be in the situation we are in today. We have been working very hard to address pay issues. Our backlog is almost 80% eliminated. Processing rates are up, and we now have a plan to arrive at our steady state. There is still much to do, and Deputy Minister Lemay will provide a new update on our progress towards resolving backlog cases and an update on our plan to reach steady state when she meets with the media on December the 14th. Turning now to the Department's Supplementary Estimates B, but keeping with Phoenix, the Department identified the need for an additional $50 million in extraordinary funding and is requesting this funding in Supplementary Estimates B. We discussed this figure when I appeared before you in September. The funding is comprised of $5.7 million for additional support from IBM, such as a 24/7 troubleshooting support and refinements to the system, $24 million of our satellite offices for our satellite offices and call centers, $16.1 million for our complaints center, training and support to departments, and system maintenance, and $4.2 million for contingencies. To Shared Service Canada's supplementary estimates, Shared Services Canada is seeking additional funding of $4.7 million, which will be largely used to support initiatives underway at client departments. For instance, $1.6 million is going to help modernize Canada's weather radar network for Environment and Climate Change Canada. Other funding is directed to support ongoing projects at Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada and the Canada Revenue Agency. $1.5 million is earmarked for added telecommunications costs related to new government employees. These investments strengthen and complement the work of Shared Services Canada as it also resets its transformation plan. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, before I turn to our committee members for questions, we have you scheduled until 4:30. Your opening statement was a few minutes over what we expected. Could I ask you, Minister, would you be prepared to stay here about an additional 5 minutes so we can get an entire round of questioning from all our committee members?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. We'll start with our 7-minute round then. It's Ms. Shanahan.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to the Minister for being here today and all the members of the panel. Of course, we didn't really want to be back here today for this update. We thought that this problem would be, this committee was told that the problem would be resolved by the 31st of October. And yet here we are, and it's most concerning that that we still have 15,000 employees that are experiencing difficulties, and it's concerning what's going to be coming down the road as well, with all of the adjustments that have to be made to employee pay. I can just imagine, having worked in a payroll department myself some time ago, the T4s and the having to deal with the out-of-pocket expenses, and I do commend you on calling on the Auditor General to proactively to conduct an audit into the Phoenix pay system, and I know, sitting on public accounts, that would have been our concern as well, given the amount of funds, taxpayer funds, that this represents. I'm somebody who likes to go to the root causes of problems, and so what really concerns me in all of this is that it could have been avoided to a large extent. And when I think back to the fact that you had to rehire experienced people and less experienced people, because I can just imagine that staff that were let go, what was it, 2 years ago, prior to the transformation taking place, were experienced staff, and they probably went off and found other jobs. And so when it came time to address this lack of capacity, that you had to go out and find people, hire them back, train new people, leading to even more problems down the road. So can you just talk to us a little bit, Minister, about how difficult that was in just trying to roll back the compensation department to where it needed to be, including the satellite department and Miramichi?
Thank you for the question. And what became obvious to us as the system was rolled out was that in removing 700 compensation advisors before the vision had actually been realized in terms of the new pay system being up and running as it should, really had a detrimental impact, because we did not have the experience there. We did not have the individuals who were familiar with all of the 80,000 regulations, the different union agreements, what was required in terms of getting the job done. So when the decision was made to remove the 700 compensation advisors by the previous government, clearly they didn't take into account what was really important here, and that was to make sure that if you're going to transform a pay system, that you do it with people who know what they're doing. By removing these individuals, you removed a core component from the 46 departments that were actually being covered with the February and the April rollout. What happened in the other departments that didn't have their compensation advisors removed, they are not experiencing the same degree of difficulty that the other 45 departments are, where the compensation advisors were removed. So that speaks for itself in terms of the impact. So I guess you learn from experience, but unfortunately it's a hard lesson to learn for those employees who have been impacted by pay issues. But I feel comfortable in saying that if the employees had not been removed, had been allowed to stay until the system was up and working as it should be, then we would not be here today having this discussion.
Thank you, Minister. But that being said, once you were in place, you reported at that time in February that that's when the phase 1 was scheduled to start. Your department told you that it was ready to go, and you gave the signal to go. The same thing with phase 2. By the time May, June, and July rolled around and it was had reached a crisis point, you met with this committee again to say that October 31st would be the date. Do you have confidence in what your officials are telling you? This is really the concern now that we have with your leadership now in the department.
I believe that the employees in the department are working very hard to make sure that we meet the deadlines. Unfortunately, what happened with October 31st deadline was that the backlog of cases, there were a significant number of those cases that were very complex. So as much as the department and as much as I wanted to be able to meet that deadline, no one puts a deadline in place not expecting to meet it. But clearly the complications, you know, that they ran into in terms of the cases, there are, as I say, there's still 15,000 of them. You know, everybody wanted a win here, and I know the department has been working really hard. I have confidence that they are doing the best they can. I think we need to find out exactly what happened to get us in the position that we're in. That's why I've called in the Auditor General to do a review of this. But you know, no one wants to do a bad job. So clearly, everybody's working as hard as they can to the best of their ability to fix this problem.
Thank you, Minister. Much. Mr. Clark, or is it Mr. McCauley? Mr. McCall?
Oh, go ahead.
Mr. McCall or Mr. Clark?
Yes.
7 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Minister, for being here today. Your presence is much appreciated.
I think that today we have a good news. I kind of see in your introduction notes that you have a more careful tone and that you have a more objective interpretation of the work ahead than it was the case in July. Since you say, you know, there's a, and I quote, steady state won't happen tomorrow, but we're seeing progress. And in the meantime, another quotation, I have put on hold plans to transition additional departments to Pay Center. So I want to congratulate on you on being more careful on your interpretation of the situation. So, Minister Foote, I'm having a hard time deciphering the statement provided to the committee and press conference statements because the numbers are sometimes only Miramichi Pay Center, and then afterwards we are told that satellite offices are also struggling with Phoenix. The second point of confusion is derived from the numbers presented sometimes as the number of files for individual public servants, and then suddenly as the number of transactions. The final but biggest frustration is receiving numbers based on backlogs, first backlogs, second backlogs, and not simply all files presently left unresolved. All this jargon makes it impossible for someone who is not a pay specialist to truly be able to gauge the magnitude of how many public servants are awaiting payments to be processed right now. So here is what we would like to understand clearly, me as well as our journalist press group friends. What is presently the total number of individual, current, and former public servants waiting for funds from all pay centers in Canada?
In our backlog, we still have 15,000, and those are the complicated cases that I refer to. So the initial discussion around a backlog, where we talked about 82,000 cases, we still have 15,000 employees who are waiting for supplementary pay. We have, within Miramichi and our satellite offices, we are dealing with our day-to-day issues that arise. We still have a regular payroll that gets paid every 2 weeks with approximately 300,000 employees getting paid. The pay where the difficulty occurs will be overtime pay, but now that we've automated that, of course, that's not the issue to the degree that it was.
But sorry to interrupt, Minister. Of the 82,000 cases that were backlogged in July, 5th of July,
yes,
there's 15,000 cases left.
15,000.
But how many cases has arrived since then? They are not part of the 82,000. Is there any of those new cases? If not, we would like to know.
What we have going through Miramichi is cases that come in on a daily basis. So your input and your output, it can vary. As I said in my remarks, in May, we were at a point where we were processing 40,000 cases there. Today, we can actually process 100,000 a month. So depends, it varies from day to day, the number of cases that come in, the number of cases that get dealt with, but on average, we are able to process 100,000 cases a day.
Transaction,
so if we have
so we will never be...
a month. So that would mean that right now, because of having taken people off out of working in Miramichi and assigning them to work on the backlog cases, that meant that there was a buildup of cases in Miramichi that we had to deal with. So we have about 2 months of work build up there. So if you were to say we can put through 100,000 cases a month, so there would be about 200,000.
Okay. Another thing that we find a little bit shocking, according to us, the official opposition, is that we learn in newspapers articles that memos were sent out in the Department of Defense, for example, to require that pay advisors get their Phoenix system training and present proof of their certificate of completion in October, because only about half of the pay advisors had completed it at that point. It had not been made mandatory at the start, apparently. So my question, Minister, is, Halloween was the date set for claiming the backlog, and if we go back a little bit earlier, on 19th of September, and I quote, you said there is no reason not to believe that the backlog won't be clear by October 31st. So how could you say that then, when half of the pay advisors had not even received the formal training for the program they were meant to be using?
We really had no reason to doubt at that point. That's why we put the deadline in place that we did. But again, when you talk about how complicated the cases were, that caused issues even for those who have experience, because there are so many different transactions that can refer to one case. So for us, it wasn't a matter of wondering whether or not we'd be able to meet or clear up the 82,000. We fully intended on doing that, but even for compensation advisors and human resources personnel who are well trained, there are issues that come up all the time when you're dealing with 80,000 different regulations and you're dealing with 46 departments.
Okay. And so today, can you confirm if all the pay advisors have completed their training for the Phoenix system?
Do you want to speak to that?
I believe the numbers you're referring to are employees and managers that had to take training.
That's right.
So we can tell you the PSPC numbers. We're at 89% for managers and 87% for employees.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Mr. Weir, 7 minutes, please.
Madam Minister, near the beginning of your opening statement, you said, quote, "We have closed the cases of 83% of employees in the backlog." Later on in your statement, you said, quote, "Our backlog is almost 80% eliminated," end quote. So what proportion of the backlog has been cleared up? Is it 83% or is it less than 80%?
It's 83%.
Okay, so the almost 80% was perhaps an error in the remarks?
It's 83%.
Okay, thank you. So 83% is clearly less than 100%. Last time you appeared before this committee, I asked whether the government was on track to meet its stated deadline of October 31st. That date has come and gone. We still have 15,000 employees remaining in the backlog. I'm wondering if you can tell the committee when those cases will finally be resolved.
There was no one more disappointed than those of us who are working at PSPC in terms of not meeting the October 31st deadline. Clearly, we had hoped that we would get them all resolved by October 31st. As I've said, a lot of those cases go back 3 years. So in terms of, it's predated Phoenix, so they are complicated cases. In terms of when we will get them cleared up, we are going to get them cleared up as soon as we possibly can. That's why we have put a dedicated team to work just on those 15,000, because we need to get those resolved as quickly as possible.
Okay, I would also like to touch on the issue of employees who will have incorrect figures on their T4 income tax forms. Your answer to this issue used to be that it would all be wrapped up before the end of the calendar year. It doesn't sound like that's the case. Your answer today seemed to be that employees could go to the Canada Revenue Agency's website or call the toll-free number. Is that really the extent of the government's plan to deal with this challenge of incorrect information on tax forms?
We're going to make available whoever we have to respond to any concerns that employees have. So whether we do that through Canada Revenue Agency or whether we do that through PSPC, clearly if an employee thinks there's a error on their T4, they need to get in touch with PSPC, and we will work with them to find out if in fact there is.
Okay, but it's not just a matter of employee concerns. I mean, if the employee actually hasn't been paid the correct amount by the end of the year, then the number on the T4 is going to be wrong.
Well, that's why we're encouraging employees to get in touch with us. That's why we have made available the call center. We have the website there. We have lines that they can call. It's really important that they reach out to us if they think they're having an issue or if they've been overpaid and they're concerned about their T4. We are going to make every effort we possibly can to make sure that if there's an issue with their T4, that it's corrected.
Okay. I'd like to ask a little bit about the costs of responding to this Phoenix boondoggle. In the supplementary estimates, we have almost $50 million to pay for supplementary pay centers, but you've also mentioned that the government is going to have to compensate employees who incurred interest charges and penalties by missing payments as a result of not receiving the money that they've earned. Do you have any sense of how much that compensation is going to cost?
The $50 million is a number we're working with at this point in time. You know, whether or not there will be additional costs remains to be seen, but at this point, with what we're working and what we're asking for, and as I spelled out what that $50 million will be used for, that's the number that we're working with. With this file, you know, if there are additional costs, then we'll have to deal with that, but at this point in time, $50 million is the number.
Okay, at a previous meeting, we were told quite explicitly by your officials that the $50 million did not include the compensation of employees. So are you now suggesting the $50 million encompasses the employee compensation as well as the pay centers?
Oh no, are you talking about the claims unit? That's a part that's separate from the money that's being spent by PSPC.
I agree, but I'm asking how much it's going to be.
Do we have a number?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a handle on the total cost of resolving the problem.
Yeah, and we don't have a number on that at this point in time.
Okay. Well, then I guess I would ask, even if Phoenix seemed like the right solution at the time, knowing what you know now, would you acknowledge that it was a mistake to rush ahead with the implementation?
Clearly, the payroll system that existed for the Government of Canada needed to be replaced. I think the issue, as I mentioned earlier, came from trying to achieve savings at the expense of employees. So with Phoenix, it was a system that the previous government decided was the payroll system we should go with. But the reality is that when you remove compensation advisors who were familiar with everything to do with payroll, with government payroll, that became an issue. In terms of the actual rollout, I was told that all of the information that needed had been looked at, that they were ready to go, that we had nothing to be concerned about. I think and February seemed to be, as the rollout happened. People seemed to be satisfied that it was working well. Then April, and I think it was
well,
with
no,
the
I think there were all sorts of problems reported in February, and I think your government went ahead with phase 2 of Phoenix, even though there were a lot of known problems with phase 1. But I do want to go back to your point about the importance of experienced pay advisors, and I wonder, was it a mistake to locate the main center in Miramichi, given that none of the people that had expertise on federal payrolls were located there?
I don't think it was the wrong decision. I think it was important. As I always say, it's important to look at making sure that we have federal employees outside of the Ottawa. If there's an opportunity in other parts of the country to have federal employees, I think that's important. I think the training, if sufficient training had been done, we would not be having an issue today. If compensation advisors had been kept on in Ottawa to support the system or the Miramichi Centre, we would not be experiencing what we're experiencing today. So locating the centre in Miramichi was not a mistake. The mistake was removing the compensation advisors who could support the employees that were in the Miramichi Centre.
Thank you very much. Mr. Whalen, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for coming today. It's clear from the testimony that we're hearing today that, like with Shared Services Canada, the previous government left Canadians and government workers with a transformation initiative that was doomed to fail. Compensation advisors were fired. Savings from pay modernization were already booked before they were really earned. Legacy systems were left understaffed. It's clear that the die was cast, but it would be helpful if you could explain to us that if you had wanted to stop the transformation initiative in February or April, what your staff officials had told you would have happened.
Well, clearly, the fact that 700 compensation advisors had been let go made it impossible for us not to proceed because we did not have the human resources necessary to deal with payroll that we should have had. We were now down to 500 and some odd employees in Miramichi. Actually, we probably didn't have 500 or even 600 until later because they were brought in so many at a time. So I think the fact that the human resources aspect of this was not considered, people with experience, people who know government payroll, that was a real issue for us. So while we were training employees and making sure that they were having a good appreciation and understanding of payroll, government payroll, then at the same time, of course, you were trying to deal with backlog cases, you were trying to deal with complicated cases. So I think the big issue for us was the layoff or people, even if we wanted to say, can we get some of these individuals back? Then they had moved on to other jobs. Some had retired. So it was impossible to be able to access the employees because they had gone on to other jobs.
Minister, you talked a little bit about the backlog with Mr. Weir. When I read the synopsis of the current state of the queue, I guess they took a snapshot, a point in time on November 16th. They said they would expect at steady state we'll have 80,000 in the queue, that we're able to process 100,000 in the queue, and so it looks like with 200,000 in the queue, which should take us 6 months to sort of work through the backlog and get down to steady state. I'm just concerned, and if you could provide us, some confirmation that you're satisfied that the department isn't burying the hard cases like they seem to have done with the projections that were given to us in the summer, where the hard and difficult cases were buried, and now we have 15,000. Do we have confidence that they're not doing that in respect of the 200,000 in the queue under the new system?
I have no reason to believe that anything is being buried. I think when they looked at the 82,000 cases and they started working on those, I believe that clearly when you got down to the more complicated cases, it takes much more time. So I have no reason to believe that in the queue that there are complicated cases, because we have put processes in place now to deal with these issues as they arise, compared to having inherited 40,000 cases that predated Phoenix.
Fantastic. Earlier in our study into the Phoenix situation, we'd asked, I believe it was Mr. Liddy, about who was letting go of the pay advisors and who was responsible for the decision making that led to almost 1,000 pay advisors being let go the Friday before the election. And I'm wondering whether or not you could speak to the advice that was given to your department immediately after having come in about those almost 1,000 people who were let go, the decision making that went into them being fired. Because it's my understanding that departments that chose to keep their pay advisors didn't have the problems. It was only those who made the very clear mistake to save money at the expense of workers' pay who have caused this crisis.
And that's the problem that I think we all now acknowledge, is that in letting go people with the experience to deal with government payroll, that caused the problem. And as I said, I don't think we would be here today having this discussion if these individuals had not been let go. In the 45 departments that we've brought together, the other 55 departments, they still have compensation advisors. They're not experiencing the same difficulty. We're all under the Phoenix payroll system, but they have the compensation advisors so that employees can deal with their compensation advisors. That's what we don't have in the other 45 departments.
Minister, after all of this, with various points along the way, people being unnecessarily let go or improperly being let go from the work that they were doing in managing the legacy system, do you have confidence in the advice that your officials are giving you?
The officials were given a job to do. They were asked to, or they were told that the government payroll system was going to be replaced, and it needed to be. It was broken. There's no doubt about that. The problem, I think, was that it was based on realizing $70 million in savings annually. And when that is the focus, or that is what you're being told, and how do you realize on that $70 million annually, then you work according to the directive you've been given. So the reality is that to achieve that $70 million annually, it meant fewer compensation advisors, which makes sense if the system is up and running, but not before you've implemented the system. So realizing savings is a possibility when you put a system in place that you're comfortable is working properly. The problem for us is that Phoenix, up and running without the support of compensation advisors to enable us to get to a point where we needed to get to that steady state wasn't possible.
Seconds.
Oh, well, very quickly then. Do you feel now then that officials throughout PSPC are aware that they need to appropriately staff their legacy systems in the context of any transformation initiatives so that we won't see this continually happening? Because I think this might be the third or fourth place we've seen this already in our first year.
I think it's really important that officials be able to speak clearly and inform those who are telling them something needs to be done, what steps should be taken to get there.
Thank you very much. We'll go to 5-minute rounds now. Mr. McCauley.
Welcome back, everyone. I think I can echo Ms. Shanahan's comment. I think we'd prefer at this point to be past this. I have to state right off the top, I have to say, very disappointed your comment that casting blame doesn't help public servants facing frustrating pay delays, and then you launch right into the blame game. Very disappointing. I think if your government had focused half the time on fixing this system rather than blaming the previous government, we wouldn't be here today. I just want to comment, you stated it's the lack of, because of layoffs, and yet your department still pulled the trigger and went ahead. We've got the Gartner report, and I'll read from it. Department testing has been achieved in just 50% pass rate. So Gartner identified that the training hadn't been done, and yet your department still went ahead. We knew of the problems in advance, and yet your department still went ahead. And I just want to quote you, March 10th, that you commented on the process of going ahead with Phoenix was an example of innovation, future government operations. It's proven to be a success. Your ADM at the time commented it was a remarkable job. And then later, absolutely a good idea to move to Phoenix, and yet now it's blame the past, blame the past. I'm just curious, how do you reconcile between blaming the previous government when it was your government that pulled the trigger? If you knew of all these problems, why did you say right after Phoenix started it was a success? And
I
why
would
did,
love
and
for
why,
it.
and
I
why
would
did your
love for
department
it.
go ahead?
I would love for it to have been a success, and nobody is more seized with the issue of making sure that Phoenix is a success. The reality is that no, I'm not interested in pointing a finger in terms of blaming, but when
And yet that's all we heard from you.
but when it's pretty obvious that the focus is on achieving savings versus keeping employees
let me
who
just
know the
ask,
system,
why did you not
then
step
that's
back from
really
the
important
cliff?
to point that out,
If
which
that
I've
was
done.
the issue, why did you go ahead? Why did you not step back and say it's not ready? Gartner's aware it's not ready. We
At
heard
no
from, we
point
heard
in
from
time-
PSAC in January.
At no
their
point in
concerns.
time did either report, certainly the report that I was shown, indicate that we should not proceed. In fact, the difficulty I was told at the time was because 700 employees had been laid off, going back to not proceeding wasn't a possibility because we did not have the human resource personnel in order to do that.
It just seems very odd if we knew of these issues. You still went ahead. I just want to bring back to our September 9th meeting. We asked you September 19th about paying bonuses for the bureaucracy responsible for this fiasco, and you said at the time, and I'll quote you again, I'm not versed in how public service gets paid bonuses. It's been 2 months, so I hope you've taken the time to be versed on the bonus system. I'd like to find out right now, have you ruled out paying bonuses for those responsible for this mess? Have you paid out any bonuses for those responsible for this?
I'll repeat again that the ongoing pay issues are not acceptable. My focus has never been on paying bonuses. I have my personal opinion on performance pay of PSPC executives involved in Phoenix.
What is your personal opinion
But
on
Treasury Board guidelines are clear. Executive pay is a responsibility of the DM and the clerk.
Have you paid out any money yet for this year?
I am not, that is not part of my responsibility as minister. That is the purview of the deputy minister and the clerk.
I congratulate you on not answering the question. I just want to follow up on Mr. Ware's question about the T4. We've seen from your report that came out today, we've had overpays in the past, larger than what we're seeing right now. How did we address that in the past so that the T4s are correct? And I also just want to follow up more of a statement on what Mr. Ware was stating, that we don't think it should be up to the public servants to follow up on their T4s. T4s are not the easiest thing to figure out if they've been off, if they're off 1,000, 2,000. I would strongly suggest that you find the resources to make sure their T4s are correct and not just throw it back at the public servants and say, it's up to you to follow up and why don't you give us a call and call the support line if you think your T4 is wrong.
It's an interesting,
Answer, if you can, Ms. Minister, a very brief answer.
Okay. It's interesting that you raise overpayments in T4s because if you look at in 2012, $53 million was paid out in overpayments. In 2013, $45 million. In 2014, $78 million. So how it was dealt with then, I don't know. I wasn't here. I wasn't part of government then. So, you know, whether or not individuals had contacted the department or the department had contacted individuals, I don't know. But I do know that we are reaching out.
Thank you. Monsieur Ayoub, 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Ayoub, 5 minutes, please. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone for being here. Madam Minister, I obviously share concern with respect to the situation in which we find ourselves now. As you say, it is unacceptable for employees not to be paid. But in my riding, I receive verbatim complaints from people. Some people, of course, understand. Some sympathize with the employees at Miramichi, while others are very concerned. But they all know that the key to the problem is the lack of training. you inherited a file that you didn't initiate from the outset, and you just got on the train while it was rolling, and you try to do as best you can. In dealing with the processing of these files, of the 80,000, some 15 are not yet processed, so that represents about 5% of all of the employees. It is unacceptable, of course, but it is a great improvement. The other hope that I see is that you speak of the Auditor General. The Auditor General, and perhaps I am more patient than some of my colleagues opposite who would like to see what is happening. I am sure that the Auditor General will be able to look into the matter, make a report, and to deal with, put his finger on the responsible issues. I am looking at that 15,000 that are yet to be processed. I hope, Minister, that you can reassure us about the procedures that will be taken and the measures that will be taken by you and your department to ensure that the backlog will no longer exist, and particularly those people working at Miramichi who are working so hard, have the means they need.
At Miramichi, these employees are working above and beyond, and I appreciate all of the hard work that they're doing. They know, of course, that it's their colleagues whose pay is being impacted here, and they want to see the issues resolved as much as we do. They take it personally because they're very dedicated, committed individuals. What we have done for the 15,000 remaining in the backlog is we have put together a group of expert advisors, expert compensation advisors, to deal solely with that 15,000. So we are hopeful that they'll be resolved as quickly as they possibly can, of course. But again, these are complicated cases, and when you go back, some of them that go back 3 years, it can involve any number of transactions that weren't dealt with, that should have been dealt with, but that weren't and were allowed to accumulate. So the individuals in this expert group that we pulled together to deal just with that 15,000, we're hoping that we'll get them dealt with sooner rather than later.
Merci pour la réponse. Les autres cas qui sont plus
Thank you for your answer. There are other specific cases, temporary employees, students. Those students who are summer employees normally, is their case being dealt with differently from more permanent employees in terms of settling all these issues?
And I have said from the outset that students don't have a savings. Students need to be paid for work performed. And traditionally, I'm told that students, like others, in a lot of cases, in previous years, would work 2-3 months with the government before being paid. That is totally unacceptable as well, because students need to be paid. And we've put a process in place to ensure that they are paid. I have heard that there are students in some departments who have not been paid, not summer students, but students who are working, coming into the system as a new hire in an interim position for a period of time, and we're looking closely at that.
Thank you very much. Mr. McCauley, 5 minutes.
I just want to go back to the Gartner report and their comment on contingency planning. It says plans to address unforeseen cutover and post-cutover issues normally in place for a program this size. These plans may be in place. None of the interviewed departments have knowledge of a contingency plans. A further follow-up, and this is after the first time it had been delayed. A second delay will have a reputational impact, but not a dollar impact on our public servants or any other problems of reputational impact. Any confidence issues with departments will likely be further exasperated with another delay. This will drive to additional scrutiny. But it goes on, departments that have made staffing adjustments in anticipation of the move to Pay Center and Phoenix will have to develop contingency plans until the next go-live date. So basically what Gartner is saying, it could have been delayed as long as they had contingency plans developed. They could not find any evidence of contingency plans, or at least no one was aware of them. Again, I just have to ask, why did we go ahead? I think Mr. Liddy, you stated IBM and SI Systems said to go ahead. The Gartner report, I think you referenced as well, said there was nothing about not going ahead, but it made pretty clear instructions and pretty big red flag about contingency plans and staffing contingencies, and yet there's nothing there, and yet you went ahead anyways, causing massive, $50 million of wasted taxpayers' dollars and, unheard of disruption with our public servants. So, again, why did we go ahead?
Yeah, so the Gartner report was commissioned by Treasury Board. We weren't made aware of the contents of the Gartner report till the 29th of January. When we had a look at it, we realized it was based on interviews with departments in December. And I quote,
I'm sorry, Mr. Liddy, when did you first get access to it?
29 January.
29 January is when you first got the Gartner?
Yeah, in draft format.
Into Public Service or to Treasury Board?
Public Services Procurement Canada. We weren't aware that there was a report being commissioned by
But you did get the report in January?
In a draft format, yes.
But you got the report in January? Because I'm
let
pretty sure...
Let me quote.
Sorry, let me finish. I'm pretty sure that in a previous
identified...
committee, Public Service stated you did not get a copy. Or as you got a copy and didn't inform the minister?
No, I got a copy of the draft report on the 29th, and we did not pass it on to the minister, because we felt we had addressed all of the issues raised by Gartner. And I'll quote, Gartner has identified only one criterion with a high probability of occurring and a high negative impact, and that was with respect to testing. And it was based on interviews and incomplete knowledge of the people that were interviewed. So when we went live, we had
departmental tests, or let me finish. Departmental testing achieved approximately a 50% pass rate.
Yeah, which is incorrect. That was based on interviews with people who were in departments and who weren't aware of what we'd actually done. So we ran 16,000 tests. And when we went live, we had 124 pay and pension defects remaining, none of which were critical. In the regional pay system that we were running, we were working with over 1,000 defects. And we did 150 releases a year.
We've asked repeatedly in this committee, Mr. Ware has asked repeatedly, could we have not have delayed? And it was again, no, we had to go ahead. It's pretty clear in the Gartner report said, yeah, apart from reputation, we can delay a second time. And it identifies, you better have these contingency reports or contingency plans and addressing the exact same thing the minister's been going on about the staffing issues, and yet we had, right here it said, be prepared for it. We cannot find the plans, and yet we still went ahead. I have to ask why.
Because the system was ready to go ahead, and we were dealing with an old regional pay system which was failing repeatedly at a huge error rate. And then when we did cut over, we ran 3 pay cycles, and the cutover was successful. The problems we've had are basically when...
About the issues of contingency and the issues of if we have to delay, you have to have a contingency plan for the staffing changes. But no plan was done up, and you went and pulled the trigger. This government pulled the trigger anyways and went ahead.
If I could answer the question, Mr. Chair.
Please.
We ran 3 pay cycles after we first cut over. We did have a contingency plan. We augmented the pay center staff by 10% to make sure we had capacity. And a number of departments, which is referred to in the Gartner report, we had to change when we were rolling them out. That was the contingency plan, which we did adopt. And when we ran 3 pay cycles in the month of February, we felt, and this is what the previous deputy had reported, and which we advised the minister, we felt that the system had actually worked. And it wasn't until May and June that we realized that the transactions were not being entered, that the pay center was behind schedule. That is when it emerged that we had significant issues. But when we made the decision to cut over, we felt like we were ready. We felt like we had resolved all of the issues raised by Gartner, even though we didn't get the report till the 29th of January, and we were relying on the independent third party that was hired to do a systematic review of the process end to end on their advice.
Thank you. Madame Ratanzi, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Minister, for putting the record straight that the overpayment occurred during the 2012 to 2015 period to the amount of $246 million, and I hope that has been recovered. In terms of the question that Mr. Kelly asked, I am looking at a letter that the Deputy Minister has sent, and it says, the department confirms that no outside consultant advised against implementing Phoenix. Independent reviews were completed by SI Systems in alignment with Treasury Board Secretariat policy prior to going live. SI System report states that on the basis of the evidence provided, the review team feels that the transformation of pay administrative initiatives should proceed to the next phase, a two-phase deployment of Phoenix as scheduled. And he talked about the benefits outweighing the risk. So could you explain to me what is this contradiction between the Gartner report and the SI report?
Yeah, I don't see it as a contradiction, actually. I think both reports found at certain points some of the same things. And SI Systems did a more systematic review. It interviewed, it looked at data it gathered. The Gartner report was based on interviews exclusively with departments. And we felt like we addressed all of the issues that were raised in both the Gartner report, and SI Systems ultimately recommended that on balance we should proceed, that the risks of remaining on the old system were...
Okay, so when the interview took place with departments, and the department's response was probably that it was not comfortable going live, could you tell me if you have sufficient competencies or capabilities within the departments to take on such large-scale enterprise projects? Is it there? Is it why that's why the department felt a little uncomfortable going live on Phoenix?
Yeah, in our case, we didn't feel uncomfortable. We thought we were ready to go. We had already delayed it. I would also say that we felt we had the competencies to deliver the project. My predecessor had spent years in the department in the compensation world, and the person who was the lead of the project, who will come to the table shortly, is Brigitte Fortin. She had spent years, and they had already implemented a very complicated pension project which serves over 800,000. And we had no fundamental issues when we implemented that, and in fact the service levels are very high now, and we've actually moved forward on that. So we felt that we certainly had the competencies, and we felt that we had the right partners involved, and we did a number of independent reviews. It wasn't just SI, we also had MapleSoft come in and do a review in 2014. And we felt like the delay that we had done, instead of launching in October and December, had bought us the time to resolve the remaining defects and get the departments ready, our partner departments ready to go.
That's the only one not really asked.
Okay, so I have a question. Sorry, Minister, you wanted to respond?
I think part of the issue, or part of the problem, and we've acknowledged this, what became clear to us was that in terms of the output through Miramichi, and this is no fault of the employees at Miramichi at all, but there just wasn't sufficient training carried out with the employees, and that, for me, was an issue that when we talked about this, is that we need to make sure that our employees have the skill sets necessary to do the job expected of them. So I think the reality is that there was a decision made prior to the launch of Phoenix, when the department determined that it was ready to go, that the training that had taken place through working with IBM was kind of a train-the-trainer model, which for anyone who knows a file of this magnitude, you really need to have more in-depth training of individuals who are going to be dealing with a payroll system as complicated as the one that we have with the Government of Canada. So that was an issue, and right now, of course, what we've done as a government is make sure that that our employees are trained.
So I have a quick question. When we were doing the study of the shared services, the challenges they were facing is lack of consultation to develop their IT transformation plan. So could you give us a little update on what's happening there? Because those are large initiatives that the government is undertaking.
Well, I'm really pleased to report that the transformation plan has been completed, and very pleased with the input that we have received. We've certainly been consulted industry, but as well there have been opportunities for Canadians to have a say into the transformation of shared services. And the President is here, Ron Parker, who will be speaking after I leave. But we're really looking forward to having a system that is the right system for the Government of Canada, recognizing that anything we do in terms of an enterprise-wide system for government takes time. We have to be prepared to invest, as we did in the previous budget, because the resources just weren't made available. And the same thing with Phoenix. These are enterprise-wide solutions that really do need to have the proper attention and resources dedicated to it for us to realize on the vision.
Thank you, Minister. Our final intervention will be Mr. Weir for 3 minutes, please.
Thank you. Madam Minister, experienced pay experts were laid off in many cases because they did not want to relocate to Miramichi. So how can you say that it was a mistake to lay off experienced pay experts, but that it was not a mistake to relocate the pay center to Miramichi?
I think it was a mistake to lay them off because I think they would have been invaluable in assisting the employees that were hired at Miramichi. Some of them took retirement, others went on to other jobs in the public service. If you're going to look at...
So you're saying, though, that their workplace should have been maintained in the National Capital Region rather than trying to locate everything to Miramichi?
What I'm saying is that it wasn't wrong to locate the pay center in Miramichi any more than it was wrong to locate the pension center in Shediac in New Brunswick. But the reality is that, if you're going to put in place a more advanced payroll system, there is a reality there that you should be able to realize savings. So whether or not the necessity of laying them off should have, would have been today or tomorrow or next week. But the reality is that we needed that expert advice, I think, to enable us to realize on the vision that the previous government had when it said we needed to replace the payroll system.
If you had seen the Gartner report in January, would you have delayed the implementation of Phoenix?
From what I'm told in terms of the Gardner report, that in fact we had dealt with the issues that had been raised in the Gardner report.
Okay, it doesn't seem so.
Well, I'm told we had, and that in fact both SI and all the work that had been done up to that point did not suggest in any way, shape, or form that we should not proceed.
Okay, in the $50 million that we talked about $6 million is going to IBM for additional monitoring. I guess I'm wondering, IBM designed the Phoenix system. What kind of responsibility does it bear? And at some point, shouldn't it be reimbursing the Government of Canada?
We've been working very closely with IBM. What they're being asked to do now is outside the initial contract. So it's additional work.
In terms of the additional contract, what kind of requirements were there on IBM? What kind of recourse do Canadian taxpayers have for this product that clearly didn't work and wasn't tested very effectively?
Well, I think it's fair to say that Phoenix as a system, that while there are issues, I think with any system, you're going to find things that you're going to have to deal with and try and find a way to better a system, and we're doing that, working very closely with IBM. But no system is perfect, and I think the employees, recognize that they're working closely with a system that, like anything else, they make recommendations on how to do things better.
We'll have to
cut
you off.
seek any compensation from IBM?
Mr. Weir, I'm sorry we're a little over time now, and I was going to have to interrupt the minister in any event. We'll have to cut it off there. Minister, once again, thank you for being with us here today. Regardless, this has been a difficult issue for everyone, both the government, most particularly the employees, and I know I can say on behalf of all our committee, regardless of sometimes a little heated discourse, our desire is to see this problem fixed and fixed permanently. So good luck to you, all of you and your officials in getting that done.
Thank
we
you.
are suspended for a few moments while we get ready for our next set of witnesses. Yeah, we're going to be a few minutes anyway. Colleagues and ladies and gentlemen, I think we will begin. Again, welcome to all of our witnesses. Again, thank you for all being here. And I notice we have, Mr. Parker, we have a new addition to the witness table, Mr. Barr. Welcome, Mr. Barr. I believe the rest of you are here, so you know how this committee operates and how we will proceed. Mr. Parker, I believe you have an opening statement. If you do so, sir, I would ask you to deliver it now, and then we'll go into our round of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've already gone through who I'm accompanied by, including Mr. Barr now, Director General for Strategic Policy Planning and Reporting. J'aimerais faire le point sur les mesures prises par Services Partagés.
I would like to give you an update on what Shared Services Canada is doing to improve service and to modernize the IT infrastructure for the Government of Canada.
Deliver IT infrastructure, the IT infrastructure backbone for the programs and services that Canadians get from the government daily. When you cross the border, when you apply for social benefits, SSC is there, providing reliable and secure systems connecting Canadians to their government. SSC is also there to assist in national initiatives such as making a home for Syrian refugees and responding to emergencies by providing increased IT capacity. J'aimerais souligner que la première fonction de
I want to emphasize that SCC's first duty is to respond to the IT needs of its customers. It is also to support them in delivering programs and services to Canadians up to the limit of our resource envelope.
Focuses on service excellence for customers and Canadians, built on easy, secure digital access to programs and services. SSC works with our customers to understand their business requirements and helps bring these requirements to life within SSC through careful planning and then delivery. I would like to note that there's been an improvement in customer satisfaction to 2.91 in October, up from 2.79 in December last year when we started to conduct surveys. This may not sound like a large improvement, but it takes a lot to move an average that's calculated over 42 customers. But there's obviously still a lot to do, an enormous amount to do. Les employés de SPC font tout.
SCC employees are putting their heart and souls into delivering for our customers. SSC employees are inspirational. They are committed to delivering for our customers. They're regularly working nights and weekends for emergencies, but also as part of the daily maintenance and monitoring to ensure the stability of the Government of Canada's IT infrastructure. The skills and talent SCC employees possess are in demand.
Are in demand. They have lots of choices about where they work. There are frustrations. Change can be destabilizing, but they have chosen to make their contribution by helping to secure the future of the IT infrastructure so critical to the service delivery to Canadians. And we need to continuously recognize all this. Maintenant, j'aimerais vous parler du programme.
I would now like to say a few words on the IT transformation agenda. Since it was first established in 2013, the environment and the technology landscape have evolved substantially.
The strategy is clear. There's an enormous growth in the demand for digital services. The scope of the need for IT infrastructure renewal could not be dealt with by departments working in silos. The need for consistent and system-wide cyber and IT security has come to the forefront, and overall economies of scale are all considerations. The revision of the IT transformation plan is based on the lessons learned in project design and service delivery. It would also benefit from the advice we've received from our wide-ranging consultations with SSC employees, customers, industry, departments, and Canadians all this fall. We were pleased to receive over 780 submissions to the consultations. SPC travaille avec le secrétariat du
SSC is working with the Treasury Board Secretariat to ensure alignment with the government's IT strategic plan for 2016-2020.
It will include detailed implementation strategies and revised timelines. The revised plan will focus on core business improvements in the areas of service management, financial management, and project management, as well as cyber and IT security. We will also enhance our people strategy. But this plan will not represent an end to transformation. Given the pace of change in IT industry, it needs to have a 3-year focus and to adapt to the continuous change in the IT landscape. Improvements must be continuous so Canadians remain well served. SSC will provide the committee with its revised IT transformation plan once it's totally finalized. The revisions will be based on SSC's fall 2016 consultations with its partners, the IT industry and Canadians, on the Treasury Board contracted independent review by the IT consulting firm Gartner and its assembled expert panel, and on any subsequent cabinet decisions, as I mentioned when we were here in May. L'infrastructure existante est constituée.
The legacy infrastructure is comprised of data centers, storage units, and computer servers. SSC has inherited that infrastructure as of when it was created. The infrastructure will be modernized through transformation projects. In the meantime, it needs service and maintenance, which is a large part of SSC's daily work with its customers.
$60 million in budget 2016 to strengthen cybersecurity protection and upgrade out-of-date mission-critical infrastructure. This investment reduces the risk of breakdown of existing infrastructure, reduces the cybersecurity vulnerability of aging systems, and keeps important services running for the benefit of all Canadians. I'd also like just to take a moment to address specific issues related to Statistics Canada. Services Partagés Canada et Statistics.
Shared Services Canada and Statistics Canada are working together to modernize the IT services that Statistics Canada relies upon to deliver its programs to Canadians.
To continue to modernize Statistics Canada's IT infrastructure to meet their business needs while respecting the confidentiality and integrity of their operations. I want to be very clear, SSC's enterprise data centers provide the data security required by Statistics Canada. Employees working at the data center serving Statistics Canada are secret cleared and take an oath to meet the requirements of the Statistics Canada Act. They are subject to the same legal remedies as any Statistics Canada employee. In addition, SSC and Statistics Canada have worked together very closely over the last 8 weeks to specify Statistics Canada's requirements for the next 12 months and map these to additional infrastructure requirements. The most pressing needs will be met by the end of February 2017, with work continuing to meet all of the identified business needs in the following months. Merci, mes collègues et moi.
Thank you. My colleagues and I will be pleased to answer your questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Right now with Monsieur Drouin for 7 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. I have questions for shared services. And I also have questions on Phoenix. As you understand, we have a great many constituents who work for the public service, so that's an issue for us. Ms. Lemay, the last time we met was in the summer. It was a little warmer then. And I asked you a question. When you said October 31st and the backlog would be dealt with by then, did you call that a conservative estimate? And you said yes, and you were sure that the deadline would be met. I'm trying to understand what happened. We know that the Phoenix backlog was known. Did we understand what caused the backlog? How did we end up with 80,000 cases in the backlog? Thank you for your question. As you've seen, we were confident at the time that we could meet the October 31st deadline. We planned it, and estimated the time that it would take to deal with some cases. What became clearer afterwards was the complexity of certain cases. 82% of cases in the backlog are transactions that predate Phoenix, some of them by a number of years. They're old transactions, and what happens is that each time a case is opened, there are more transactions to add to it. So these are very complicated cases. And that's really what happened and what took more time than we estimated. So now we've put dedicated teams of experts on those complex cases, both in Miramichi and in the satellite units. But to repeat what my colleagues on the other side asked, the minister said in September that she was confident the deadline would be met. And she must have heard from your team. But it was clear that by August, it was clear because there were still 60,000 cases left and there was no way the October deadline would be met. Well, it wasn't clear to us because we said that as soon as we knew we wouldn't meet the deadline, we would let you know. I'm sure you followed our technical briefings. We had a curve and we managed to maintain it until almost October, in fact. That's when we fell under it. I think we have to bear in mind that we've done a great many very important things. The satellite units established were set up, and we had to hire hundreds of people. We established a call center. There are huge technical improvements we've made. We've created all kinds of communication instruments for employees. We've done a great deal to give employees access. I agree. But should we not have said in early September at least that the October 31st deadline might not be met?
The Gartner report, was that shared with Madame Lemay? Was this shared with, why wasn't that shared with the minister's office? I mean, if we go back to February when the advice was given, okay, move ahead, if that Gartner report would have been there, by the way, Minister, we have a Gartner report that says, there might be some issues. I mean, I don't know if the minister would have reacted the same way if she had in her hands that particular report. So why was that not shared?
Well, we thought we had addressed all of the concerns in the Gartner report when we went live. That's why, and we felt we had a more systematic third-party review, which provided us assurances that we were making the right decision to move forward.
But you also we heard from the union leadership that they kept telling you guys that we're not going, there are problems, there's problems. So given that, yes, you may have had a third-party report and you were assured, but there were still some concerns raised by other parties.
Yeah, not in January there weren't. And when we went forward, so again, most of the Gartner report was based on interviews with departments. When we went forward to the Public Service Management Committee, the Secretary of the Treasury Board canvassed the room of all of the departments, including those that were interviewed, and asked, given that what they had just been told, where we were with testing, where we were with readiness, did they feel we were ready to go? Bridget can comment better on the union engagement, but in January and December, when the last union engagements occurred, we also felt like they were ready to go with us and we were ready to move forward in partnership. And then as I said, we ran 3 pay cycles where we felt like the cutover had gone well. And it was only when we started to see that the transactions, so I think the first signs from the union, if I remember correctly, were after we had actually had the blackout period for the second cutover. So again, the point, we had sort of crossed the point of no return, we felt at that point.
I have to ask on behalf of my colleague, Monsieur Fergus and Mr. McKinnon and Mr. Amos, they're really concerned about the T4 issues. As you know, in Quebec, you don't do one income statement, you do 2 tax filings, and that's going to have a huge impact on their constituents, including public servants who are being impacted by Phoenix. What's the strategy to deal with that? Are we going to give them enough headway to deal with this, or how are we going to deal with this?
So you've heard the minister talk about the priorities. The transactions that have the most implications on tax implications are the terminations, the leaves without pay, we have disabilities and new hires. So we're really concentrating on those to minimize any implications on the taxation period. Now, Having said that, one of the things that we have seen is there are overpayments, obviously, and you've heard about that. So what we've put in place is a method. We have a call center, and if employees want to repay the overpayment, they can call the call center. But what that does with the overpayment is that if the overpayment is recorded before the end of the year, not repaid but recorded, the T4 will reflect the overpayment will not be reflected in the T4. So we've actually, through TBS, with our folks, Brigitte's team, and the unions, worked with Revenue Canada, and actually Revenue Quebec, to be able to come to an agreement where those T4s, if the overpayment is recorded, the employees don't have to have paid it back, but the T4 will not reflect the overpayment. And in terms of the emergency payments, so you may have heard about those, they don't appear as an earning on the T4. So,
thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. McCauley, 7 minutes, please.
Welcome back, everyone. Mr. Parker, first of all, congratulations on getting the service scores up. It's a remarkably big jump when you look at it. And I have quite a few constituents in my riding who work downtown at the government office for shared services, and they've commented they've seen similar or getting similar feedback on the scores. So very well. The weather services, it's $400,000 for an upgrade for weather services. Where and what exactly is that for?
I'm going to ask our CFO to respond to that.
Just real briefly,
Mr. Chair.
So thank you for that question. This is a top-up on the weather renewal project that's taking place. There's already funding in the system, but there was a recognition at the time of the development of the Treasury Board submission from a timing perspective that there'd have to be a small top-up that would go through supplementary estimates in latter years.
Good.
And that's what we're seeing now.
Perfect. Mr. Parker, we've seen a media report talks about the big red 10 projects that are code red. Now, this is going to come as a shock to a lot of people around this room and probably watching TV, but do you have enough money to address these red 10s so we don't end up with bigger issues down the road? And is it a resource issue where you've got the money but not the bodies, or?
For the most part, the issues are not related to money. Just a bit of context for the overall portfolio of projects that we have, Mr. Chair. About 75% of the projects are green, 13% are yellow, about 7% are red, and approximately 6% remain to be classified.
And you can move those reds into the yellows?
There is progress on a number of them and moving them into yellows. Some are red and likely will remain red for a period of time yet.
StatsCan's not red, though.
StatsCan is not red.
Good. Okay. Ms. LeMay, Ms. Giddy, I just want to read an email that I got while we were chatting before. It's from a public servant watching on TV right now. She goes, I'm retiring after a 36-year career on December 29th. I've been overpaid, underpaid by $7,000. I've called the pay center weekly, daily about the issue, and now I've been told to stop calling. I cannot get any answers or anyone to call me back, even when promised. Trying to repay the overpayment, not have my T4 affected, be able to receive my well-earned pension, etc. I wanted to come back to this, and I'm glad Mr. Drouin brought it up as well. This whole T4 thing, there are still problems out there, and I'd like to get some sense of reassurance from both of you that it's not just a matter of telling them, like we've told this lady, just call the call center, and now the call center's telling her, stop bugging us, call someone else. Are we going to have an actual plan in place, a contingency plan, like something concrete to help these folks so, come January 2, they're not getting T4s that reflected money they didn't receive?
So the issue of T4 has been on our radar for a while, and
we
it's
spoke
already
about in September,
it's already been
these problems are still happening.
So the discussions are already taking place, like I said, with the unions, treasury boards, and our folks to make sure, and CRA and Revenu Québec, to make sure that we have everything in place to support the employee. The first thing is to get through those transactions as quickly as we can. The terminations are the transactions that are on our priority list with like I said, the other transactions. But in supporting the employees, there's a number of things that we are doing. The CRA has a line up already. We will have one for specifically explaining the T4 in a little while, as soon as close to T4 season. And we will be, it will be a seamless work arrangement so that employees are supported and understand how to read the T4.
I have to ask, and I'm sorry for sounding cynical, but you know, we sat here in July, we were told October 31st, we were told that was a hard deadline. We heard the minister, I think in September, say she has no reason not to believe it's not going to be October 31st. We're hearing the same assurances now about the T4s. I mean, why should we believe you? Like, what assurances, besides saying we're talking about it, are we going to have in place to look after these people? And these are real concerns. They don't all have access to an accountant or this and that, and they're getting turned away from call centers. Like,
So
it's become a real lack of confidence issue.
I absolutely hear you about these are real people, and that really is something that matters a lot to us. I think we're at a very different point than we were this summer or in the spring when we implemented. We now have the capacity, and we know that we process more cases that come in. That's a critical stage. We know how long it takes to process cases. We have real data that we can actually model and plan with. And we are working with our partners. We're working with the departments, we're working with the unions, we're engaging our employees. So everybody is totally engaged in this, and we're at a totally different place than we were earlier.
Great. The satellite offices, like we talked about, we've heard a lot about the steady state, and that's a whole new buzzword I can use in the future. You know, assuming that we eventually have Phoenix running, we get to a steady state, the satellite offices, the added bodies, extra money, how much is this of that is permanent program spending? How much of that is going to get wrapped up and kind of closed down when we hit a steady state?
So what we've said all along, and you've heard the minister say that, we will keep them open as long as we need that. So we will make sure that we have them.
Assume it's all perfect. We've got a steady state. We've got everyone's T4s, no backlog. Do we close the satellite offices, or is it the intent to keep them running?
So what we will be
forever?
doing, again, is the model that we're developing, we're talking and meeting with the unions and the departments to make sure that we have looked at all the issues, all our assumptions are right, and we'll be able to see in time what is it that we need. Do we need more bodies, or don't we need more bodies? So we're not excluding anything, but we haven't cast a die on that.
Yet. Okay.
Much. We have Mr. Weir for 7 minutes, please.
When the minister was asked about executive compensation, she indicated that was the responsibility of the deputy minister. One of the concerns about the Phoenix pay system is that its implementation may have been rushed in order to meet an artificial deadline to allow senior executives to qualify for performance bonuses. Can you tell us whether any of those bonuses have been paid, or whether Phoenix executives have accrued bonuses that may be paid out at a later date?
So I would like first to, I was going to say, debunk the myth. There is no speed target for executive to implement Phoenix so that they could get their bonus. So that is not the case. In terms of the performance pay, I have assessed, and we have assessed all the executives at PSPC, and some of the performance pay for executives will be on hold until we have the evaluations that I talked about, and we will assess accordingly, and others will get their performance pay.
Okay, and when you say on hold, that doesn't mean they're not receiving the bonus, it just means a delay.
I said on hold for performance pay until we have the evaluation and we can assess accordingly.
Okay. Question on shared services. Our committee heard from Wayne Smith, the former chief statistician, who resigned in protest of what he saw as major problems in the arrangement between your organization and his. I wonder if you could just give us, your take on, his resignation.
I met with Mr. Smith quite a few times between about December 2015 and April of this year. And we discussed the issues that he raised. We did work through the operational and other issues to that point. There were no technical or operational issues that were left on the table. Yes, there was a lot of work still to do. But the point of principle that Mr. Smith raised in terms of the overall situation he believed he was in, that was not something that we particularly focused on, as that is a really operation of government set of issues outside of my purview.
What do you, I mean, I take the point that you've been given a mandate to provide IT services to Statistics Canada, but Mr. Smith makes the point that there are some entities within government, such as the Parliament itself, that have been deemed so independent that they need to have their own IT. They shouldn't rely on shared services. Do you think he has a point with respect to Statistics Canada?
Those decisions are the purview of the Prime Minister in terms of the machinery of government. To a large extent, the decisions revolve around the different, I would call, jurisdictions of executive level of government versus the Parliament versus the judiciary. So they respect the division of accountabilities throughout the Westminster system. And similarly for the parliamentary entities like the Auditor General that follow that type of process. So, but just to come back, who is a SSC customer is fundamentally decided through the Orders in Council.
So if we just take it as given that that decision was made, is it important for shared services to have a monopoly on the IT services for Statistics Canada, or would it be legitimate to say shared services will do what it can, but if Statistics Canada needs something more, something different to fulfill its mandate, it can go to other suppliers of IT services?
The government has decided to go with an enterprise approach for the reasons I noted in my opening statement. And those are the foundational factors that I believe led to the conclusions of who should be covered and the nature of the services, mandatory or not. If there are special requirements that one of our customers have, we will work closely with them to develop a service level agreement related to that with the appropriate charges to make sure that we can deliver those services.
I did also want to ask the Department of Public Services and Procurement whether any effort is going to be made to recoup money from IBM given the problems that are now apparent with the Phoenix Pay system and specifically with the inadequate testing of it before it went live.
So we, with the contract with IBM right now, any defects that could have happened, they are correcting as part of warranty. We have no reason to sue IBM right now.
Okay, so you're satisfied with IBM's design and testing of Phoenix?
They have provided what they were asked to provide, and they are correcting when it's not working from that point of view.
Okay, so you see the problems as lying within the Government of Canada, not IBM?
The problem will end up being, I believe, a multiple point of failure. I don't think you can point to one problem.
Well, is IBM one of the points of failure?
I
And
would
should
say
they
that,
have some accountability for that?
like I said, the way the contract was set up, IBM has delivered and is actually respecting its warranty and correcting defects if they come up.
Okay. One of the explanations that's been presented for not meeting the October 31st deadline is that the remaining cases are particularly difficult and complex cases. But wouldn't it always be a situation that the cases that are left at the bottom of the pile or that are resolved last are the most difficult ones? And shouldn't that have been anticipated?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because at the moment of implementation, there was a backlog that we did not expect of old transactions. Those were transactions that we had to deal with at the moment. So that's at the starting point. And as you know, we did not have the capacity to be able to process at the moment of transition for a number of reasons. You know, this is a complex implementation, complex system, as you know. You would have normal a learning curve, except that in this case, we underestimated the change management and the learning. Plus, we did not have the capacity to be able to mitigate that. We had to go out and rehire over 200 people. So that really kind of lagged everything. So those big cases that we had, the ones that come from pre-Phoenix, are, like I say, complicated and transactions that date
complicated situation, Minister, but unfortunately I have to keep your answer brief. We are now going to Madame Ratanzi for 7 minutes, please.
Thank you. And my questions are going to be addressed to you, Mr. Parker, for the first round. According to the SSC's current quarterly financial report, you are forecasting a $2.2 billion in expenditure. Could you tell me what is capital and what is operational? Is it split between capital and operational?
It is split between capital and
how much?
Operational. Alain, do you have the breakout of that, please?
Certainly. If you were to look at the supplementary estimates page proofs, you would see that the capital is at $445 million.
Mm-hmm.
The operating is $1.3 billion.
Okay.
And
fair
to
enough.
that, to that we would add just over $400 million in revenue, which would come in on the operating side, altogether bringing it up to $2.3 billion.
Okay, but that was a budget expenditure. So why would you add your revenue to a budget expenditure? Was $400 million a revenue?
So the $400 million in revenue is comprised of a couple of factors. On the one hand, approximately $160 million is collected as a result of the Admin Services Review formula. So when SSC was created, some of the reference levels were established by the transfer of appropriations.
Right.
And some would be complemented, if you will, on an annual basis by the transfer of revenues from departments.
So it's a quid pro quo, like it's cost neutral? Your revenue is cost neutral?
No, the revenue is covering a cost.
Okay.
In the case of the Admin Services Review formula, it's complementing our base reference level.
Okay, so the question I asked was why would you add a revenue to your expenditure, but it's okay. I have another question then. You forecasted, or I think you said that you had $460 million that was given to you in budget 2016. What was it for? Is it to support the transformation of the government IT systems?
The funding was basically divided into two buckets.
Okay.
The first bucket was about $383 million,
right.
And that was for the renewal of the mission-critical legacy, the existing infrastructure. That's replacing equipment in place, whether it's networks, servers, storage, whatever is deemed to be mission-critical. So that, no, it's not geared to transformation per se. The other $77 million was targeted at improving cyber and IT security.
Okay. So in your supplementary estimates B, you're asking for $4.1 million for the incremental cost of providing core information technology service. Mm-hmm. Is this a one-time cost or is it a continuum?
Mr. Duplantis will take that question.
When it comes in through supplementary estimates, it's in year only. It's not
it'll be an annual cost that you'll ask for, because in 2015 you asked for $3.1 million, some $3.7 million in 2015. So is this every year that you're going to ask an incremental on your subs?
Sorry, which component of supplementary estimates?
So I'm looking at $4.1 million that you're asking for this year as your sub B. but in 2015 you had asked for 3.7 million. Is it because you were not able to predict properly the cost? Is it unexpected costs that you are trying to adjust?
So there are different components to make up the $4 million or $4.5 million. In some respects, there are transfers between departments, which are mid-year, in-year adjustments based on the evolution of plans. In one respect, it's in regards to the weather radar project, which is $1.6 million. It's starting in this fiscal year. Money's coming in through supplementary estimates. I anticipate that we will see it through the main estimates process because there are planned expenditures over about a 4 or 5 year horizon on that project, starting in this fiscal year.
Thank you. Madame Lemay, I have a question for you. You know, there was a question asked about IBM, and were you satisfied, or was IBM going to provide any compensation? And you said IBM provided what it was asked to do. And so my question is, the confusion we have in the Phoenix system, if IBM was provided the things that we asked, was there a fault in the RFP? Because if your RFP is not properly prepared, then you have a problem.
Again, when we do the evaluation and when the Auditor General comes, I'm sure that we will have different points that will be identified. But I would say that you know, the transition and the issues that the employees are facing right now have more to do with how at the time of implementation we underestimated the change management associated to this system, because it's actually a real change. It's an HR change. HR is now pay. There's some real changes, and we did not, I believe, collectively provide the proper environment for employees and managers to understand it. So that's the first.
How many minutes do I have? How many minutes?
30 seconds.
Oh, okay. Because I wanted to ask you to take us through the implementation process from the time that this project was implemented, or the decision to go forward. And if you can't answer me in 30 seconds, I will have to let somebody else ask you the question.
Might be a little hard in 30 seconds, but you're talking since 2009 when the project was approved?
Yes, and then you were not there probably, but you know, we need to know some timelines so that we understand the complexity and what the decision-making problems were.
And of course, now the entire 30 seconds has
It's
been taken
gone.
up with the question. We'll move on to Mr. Clark for 5 minutes, please.
Monsieur le Président, Madame Lemay, je vais continuer avec...
Thank you, Chair. I'll continue with you, Ms. Lemay, if you don't mind. Why did you decide to wait for more than 6 months to install the Phoenix Pay system in terms of the obligations involving managers, the problems, and the problems, given rather the problems that were surrounding the system? Well, what I would say is this. That is part, as I said earlier, of the whole aspect of the management of change for the reasons that are peculiar to each department. They were not described by the employees to the and we have been able to train some 80% of the managers and many of the employees, and this is something that has an impact on the operation of the system. Well, given the very intense problems, is that not mandatory training? Well, we didn't make it mandatory, but we encouraged people to take the training. So obligatory, mandatory or not, we encourage people to take the training. A question that I asked the minister, and she wasn't able to answer it, as to explaining why new cases are difficult to identify because of the multiple transactions involved. But you were able to identify that there were 82,000 cases on July 5th, But despite the complexity of the old cases and the new cases, on July 5th you were able to identify 82,000, and now there remain some 15,000 cases. You are not able, though, to tell us what the number is of the new cases that didn't form part of the 82,000. Well, I don't know what the minister... I just want to be sure of this. First of all, the backlog is the 82,000 that we were talking about. And commonly speaking, I'm not aware of all of the transactions that go out or come in. We certainly have been working to capacity to deal with these transactions. In May, we dealt with some 90,000. There was, though, an accumulation of cases, and that is what would explain it. About 2 months of additional work, if you like, beyond the standards of service. These are the 200,000 that she referred to. We were able to process some 100,000 of them. Well, it seemed ambiguous to me, because if you aren't able to identify over months the 82,000 cases that were a problem for Phoenix, it seems to me that there would be other problems involved. Are there new cases that are directly linked to Phoenix? I thank you for your question, and I want to say this. It's not necessarily pay problems. These are transactions that take more time, and that slows down the processing of the pay cases. So it's not always problems, though. It's the volume of transactions. If there are issues involved, and if you set up a system, say, where someone who isn't being paid, it's very important for us to know that. They could have an emergency payment, they could go to the department, or else they could fill out the form that we have on our website, and we would be able to see that they are paid. That is, if somebody is not being paid at all. But at the pay center, there are many transactions that take longer time to deal with and process because they are complex. The Public Service Management Committee meets from time to time, and that's a good thing. But how much time, can you explain to me when your committee met to deal with the go live aspect of implementing Phoenix? Can you tell me when? 31 January 2006. So January 31st, 2006 was the exact date. Thank you. 16. 16. Oh, I'm out of time? 5 minutes. Oh, I'm taken aback a little. I didn't think it was my turn right away, but in any case, just give me a moment, please.
Au niveau des services publics d'approvisionnement Canada.
In Public Service and Procurement Canada, there was a $5 million investment for capital purchases. Where did they come from, and how did you calculate the figures? I'll let Mr. Mondu answer the question.
The way that the funding revolves, when we sell or dispose of an asset, we will bring the proceeds of the sale of that asset back into the department for future investment in our capital programming. So what you're seeing here in our estimates for that $5 million item is we have now entered into the first phase of a disposal of a building. I believe it was a parking garage. This is the bringing home or bringing back to the department the first segment of 2 segments of installments for that. And the way that it works is once it's concluded its sale, we'll bring the rest of the money in through a supplementary estimates some year in the future when that asset is actually successfully sold.
Okay. Peut-être dans le même, j'imagine, dans la même.
In the same vein, you received $54.5 million for the upkeep of federal structures, for bringing them up to the standard level. What part of that was affected in terms of investment? Do you think that the amounts that have been invested suffice, or do you think that in the future you will perhaps need more money to bring things up to the standard level?
$54 million, although it shows up in these supplementary estimates, that's actually an item going all the way back to supplementary estimates A. And this was a horizontal investment program annualized, as you know, for the federal infrastructure investment in federal assets. So it's showing here as a tabled item, but we've had that money since the beginning of the year when the supplementary estimates were tabled, and we've been investing those in those horizontal projects that go behind that particular expenditure. And they're made up of something in the order of $500 million that was dispersed over several federal departments in those horizontal initiatives. To your direct question, I can't speak to whether or not that exact amount, like where we're at on that precise amount. We have, this is part of a multi-year investment strategy for the restoration and rehabilitation of many, many federal assets.
Okay, merci. How many more? 2 minutes? Madame Lemay.
Thank you, Madame Lemay. Perhaps I could ask you a question about Phoenix, unfortunately. In certain cases, and I've heard about certain recurrent cases that are particularly complex when there is a data entry for certain employees who punched into the site. It gives me a picture of a situation that involves people that are having difficulties, and yet their difficulties are not being addressed by the system. Administratively speaking, there's a manual approach. Things have to be done manually and by hand. How do you react to this? Do you have a category of problems that have been identified? It was mentioned in July. Are you able to evaluate them, and can you tell me the steps that you would take so that they don't recur? There are a variety of ways of correcting this situation. What we have done, and we've had about 30 sessions to date, where we have an integrated team that will bring in human resource people from a variety of departments, and they will look at the three major issues, the ones that recur the most often.
Those have to work very well, and we have to make them work very well so that we can help people from the department support their employees. That is one of the ways in which we can arrive at the root of the problem.
Parfait, fantastique. Donc, j'étais rendu à la question que je voulais savoir.
Great. I was wondering whether your department had provided for the implementation of specific bonuses for those in charge of ensuring that Phoenix would be up and running by a given date. I don't know whether you know how performance agreements work. No, and I would like to know. Well, normally they have a number of goals, but there's no goal. A specific date is not an objective. A performance agreement has a number of objectives, and one is assessed on how well one has achieved those objectives. Are there criteria associated with those objectives? Yes, of course. But coming back to the question you put earlier regarding incentives, an incentive, yes. An incentive for implementing Phoenix quickly. No, there wasn't an incentive for that. The incentive was successful implementation. That's a different criterion, I understand. In the Gardner report, the report states that it would be wiser to have kept the legacy program while implementing Phoenix. Was that done? Was the legacy pay system kept in place? Well, we kept it for a while, and then after that, it remains available for archival information, but it's no longer updated with current information. Did the department envisage keeping it in real time, keeping it on, active, as it were? No. No. There was no provision for keeping it on after the second implementation of Phoenix. I believe, Ms. Lemaine, one of your last public statements, you talked about hiring more officials. Are their salaries included in the supplementary budget? Perhaps you're referring to the statement we made with the Professional Institute. Well, yes, be it included in our operational budget or elsewhere. We haven't yet gone ahead with the hiring, in fact. There have been expressions of interest, so we'll see whether we can go ahead. But their salaries are included in the supplementary budget. We did have an amount set aside for contingencies.
In September, we asked if we were running into a danger of growing the secondary backlog while we were tackling the main backlog. And I don't know if we got a 100% clear answer. I'm just trying to figure out what is the secondary backlog. We've also heard reports that the non-Miramichi pay centers, which is 30% of, I believe, the public service, those backlogs aren't being counted toward this 82,000 that was originally announced in July. And then any new numbers after added to the 82 are also not part of the backlog. I know we're just bouncing backlog, but what is the non-82,000 backlog?
So thank you for allowing me to clarify that. When we talk about the backlog, we're talking about the department serviced by Miramichi, because that's what PSPC is responsible for.
Yeah, we know that, and there's 15,000 left. What's the other side of the coin for outstanding backlog?
So at Miramichi, that's the incoming transactions that I was talking about. That's the work, that the equivalent of 2 months of work, the transaction, the pay center.
So there is no non-Miramichi backlog?
So the non-Miramichi, we have, the way we've done this is over the summer we've been in touch with the departments, that because we don't service them in terms of pay. They have their pay advisors in the departments. And we, just before the end of October, we did a last touch with 15 of the departments that represent about 70%, and they were seeing no issues like ours. So the CRA being one of the big ones, were by October 31st, I believe, we're done. So
yeah, you come in September. Oh, okay.
Just when it was getting good. Mr. Fraser, welcome to our committee, and we have 5 minutes for you, sir.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Avant que je commence, je voudrais...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin, I'd like to thank the witnesses for having come here today.
I'm new to this committee for today. One of the things that would really help me, even though I have been paying attention to this issue in the news and in my discussions with caucus colleagues, would be if you could walk us through the process that led us up to today. I think my colleague, Madame Ratansi, mentioned earlier that she wanted sort of a picture of how things rolled out, and you started to mention the implementation of the pay modernization system began in 2009. A 50,000-foot overview of how this thing went would be very helpful to me, and I think to Canadians as well.
So this is the pay transformation initiatives with 2 components, the pay consolidation and the pay modernization. And if we look at the consolidation, that decision to implement the gradual consolidation of pay services in Miramichi was made in December 2011. And in 2012 in January, the first wave of workforce was adjusted. So about 125 people got their letters saying that they would be adjusted. And the first wave of people were hired in Miramichi in March 2012. Then there was a second wave of people that were informed that they were affected back in September 2012, and a second wave of hire in September 2013, and then a third, October 2014, for a hire in January 2015. At that point, a number, about 1,400 compensation advisors had been informed that their work would be affected, and about close to 500 were hired in Miramichi. So that's for the pay consolidation portion. In terms of the modernization portion, that's the Phoenix portion, and that actually covers 101 departments. And sorry, I should have said the consolidation was for 46 departments. So that's when the compensation advisors went from, or the compensation staff went from 2,050 to about 1,320 overall. So the departments that are not serviced by Miramichi kept their compensation advisor, and the consolidation for the 46 department happened in Miramichi. Parallel to that, you have the pay modernization, which is Phoenix, and the implementation and the rollout that we heard about, the wave 1 and 2s.
Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left? 2 minutes? Just changing gears momentarily, I know that a PSPC official told the committee that services related to contaminated sites are part of the optional services provided by PSPC to other federal departments. The PSPC in the supplementary estimates is requesting $5.7 million for the Federal Contaminated Sites Action Plan. What kinds of contaminated site services are we talking about here that PSPC provides to other federal departments and agencies?
Yeah, so on a fee-for-service basis, we do project management. Rather than having a number of government departments duplicate expertise in contaminated site management, we offer it on a fee-for-service basis. So design, contracting, engineering, and we've done some of the larger ones. Sydney Tar Ponds, for example, Giant Mine in the Northwest Territories. We've got a large project going on in Victoria. These two that are specific here are our own. One is the Esquimalt Graving Dock, and we ran into some challenges just on a failed tender, actually. And the other one is we were going to decontaminate the land under the proposed site for the victims of communism on Wellington, and that project is no longer going forward.
And are these figures representative of a cost recovery model?
No, these are actually money that was given to us out of the Federal Contaminated Sites Action Plan. We got about $112 million, and we're just carrying forward that to do work in this year.
So to the extent that you're requested to assist with further contaminated sites in the future, you'd presumably in the next round of estimates or supplementary estimates see an additional increase?
Well, we will get some of our own money for our sites specifically, and we would also continue to offer that service to other government departments.
Okay.
As part of the broader plan.
Mr. Chair, is there any time left?
15 seconds.
No, thank you very much. I'll take that opportunity to say thank you to the witnesses. That's very helpful.
Thank you very much. Mr. Weir, 3 minutes, please.
Well, I would also like to welcome Mr. Fraser to our committee, even though it's somewhat intimidating to have someone taller than I am on the government side. I want to return to the Phoenix pay system. There's been a lot of focus today on the backlog, but of course new problems crop up every day, and I appreciate the government has chosen to classify that as not meeting the service standard as opposed to adding to the backlog. But I want to ask about this notion of the steady state that we're trying to get to and what that would look like. In that steady state, how many problems with payrolls would be considered to be normal or acceptable?
So again, we don't define the transactions as problems. I mean, if you have it acting and you put the transaction in, that's not a problem. That's a pay transaction that we have to resolve. So that's part of what we get.
Okay, so how many unresolved transactions would be considered normal in the steady state that we're trying to achieve?
So we, if we look at the last few months, what we estimate right now is about 80 to 85,000 transactions a month. So requests for a pay action.
Okay, and in this steady state, would the temporary pay centers be shut down, or would some of them continue to serve?
We'll have to evaluate that because, as I said, right now our capacity, we know we can do 100,000 transactions a month, but that's it with the satellites, and they're really, really important. So the assessment we'll have to make is how efficient are we when we get steady state, and what do we need in terms of capacity?
Okay, and if those temporary pay centers were maintained, that would really wipe out the supposed savings of converting to Phoenix, wouldn't it?
Well, that would change the original plan, obviously. Yeah.
It seems that both Phoenix and shared services have been these attempts to centralize government services that have encountered many problems. Is there some kind of systemic reason why the Government of Canada has difficulty with this kind of enterprise-wide transformation?
Interesting. How long do I have to answer that one?
Give her a shot.
I'll just say this. I mean, and we will learn. We have already learned a lot from Phoenix implementation, and we will learn more. The Government of Canada is a big organization to have pan-government systems. It's like 101 organizations. So we will learn about how we need to build the accountability, the governance of these projects. And pay is one where it really matters, and we will hear everything until the last minute. So we will take advantage of that and learn from it, because we need to be able to apply that to other projects that we do.
Very good. Right on time. Colleagues, as you know, I mentioned at the outset of this meeting, even though the bells will start ringing in just a few moments, we will go till 6 p.m. and we'll try and get as many questions in as we can on the normal rotation round. So we'll now go to Mr. Whalen for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Weir, if you like to hang out with tall people, you're more than welcome to come play for the Liberal basketball team. Mr. Liddy, I just want to drill down a little bit on some of the timing issues around this Gardner report. Mr. McCauley's brought it up at a number of meetings. Mr. Drouin has referred to it. Can you just clarify that you received the draft Gardner report on January 29th?
Yes, on the 29th of January.
Was there a follow-up, a final report that you received at a later date?
Yes, there was. It was within a few days, but I don't recall exactly.
So sometime in the first week of February?
Yeah, but we took sometime in, I would say sometime in the first week of February, I can clarify.
And when did you make the minister aware of the report?
I believe, I'd have to go back, but it would have been after the second committee appearance here. I think in the summer is when I believe that we made the minister.
So you received the report essentially around the first week of February, but did not make the minister aware of the report until well past the decision-making time regarding the implementation of Phase 1 or Phase 2 or the inclusion of the special branch offices to deal with the issue. It wasn't until August almost that you made the minister aware of the report.
Yeah, I would have to go back and check, but that sounds about right. Again, this was a report commissioned by Treasury Board Secretariat, not part of the governance process.
Who precisely in Treasury Board would have commissioned the report?
I believe it was commissioned by the Comptroller General of Canada.
And is the Comptroller General responsible for all pay to all government employees?
Well, the Treasury Board Secretariat is the employer, and they are the employer, and so they have responsibility for collective bargaining.
So if the Comptroller General had commissioned a report regarding its ability to ensure that employees are being appropriately paid, don't you think that you should have made that immediately available to the minister?
We felt that we had addressed the concerns that were raised. We took all of the concerns.
Well, it's pretty clear at this point that the concerns weren't addressed. But at the time, you're saying you felt that she was fully informed when she wasn't provided the existence of a report that directly went to the auditability of the system?
Yeah, we felt we had addressed the concerns, and when we made we didn't make a recommendation. We informed the minister of the decision to move forward. Actually, it wasn't the minister's decision. We felt that we had addressed all the concerns raised by Gardner, and so did the deputy minister community, including the Comptroller General and the Secretary of the Treasury Board.
So you consulted the Comptroller General about the report?
Absolutely.
And what issues did the Comptroller General have about the Phoenix pay system?
The ones that were raised in Gardner, and also the ones that had been raised to him directly by heads of HR and CFOs.
And so what would they be?
Testing, readiness to go live within the pay center itself.
What about auditability?
No, that wasn't one of the concerns that was raised.
What about the accuracy of pay? Anything related to the Comptroller General's concerns regarding the accuracy of pay?
Not that I recall.
Just another thing that you've mentioned that is sort of making me think of some other testimony that we've received. How long does it normally take, or under the old system, how long did it normally take for employees to receive their special pay, things like overtime pay, duty pay for filling in for somebody else's duty, mat leave pay, these non-standard pay?
It really varied by department because each department had its own. But I can give you an example. 75 days was not abnormal for acting, for example.
Right, so that would be 5 pay periods.
Yes.
And so you said the pilot was designed to see 3 pay periods. So who provided the advice that a 3 pay period pilot was going to be sufficient to determine any issues with respect to non-standard pay?
When we did the initial rollout that the deputy mentioned in December, the decision was to go from a one big bang, 1 cut over to 2 cuts, and we felt that 3 pays was sufficient to do that.
On what basis did you feel that 3 pays would be sufficient, given you've just told me now that it's 5.5 pay periods before you'll even expect to receive overtime pay?
Yeah, but the system is designed to eliminate that gap. The system was designed to
Yes,
allow
but
people to enter.
Mr. Liddy, I'm sorry. It may have been designed to eliminate the gap, but the only way that we would know whether or not there was problems would be self-reporting by employees, so it's their experience of pay that matters. So when we first started receiving as MPs our concerns in May, that jives very well with your 75-day timeline when people were saying, well, wait now, I haven't received my overtime pay from February. Who made the decision, or who recommended to the minister that 3 pay periods would be sufficient to determine issues that employees themselves would not recognize as a problem until almost 11 weeks?
Again, we're talking about 2 different systems, so you can't really compare.
We're talking about employees receiving their pay, and it's their experience that's important here.
No, I totally agree with you. It is about employees receiving their pay, and no one's working hard to regulate that, but it's 2 different systems. So one system was designed to automate, so they wouldn't have to wait 75 days.
I'll repeat my question. How was the 3 pay period length recommended? How did that recommendation come about? Because it clearly defies all logic.
I'm not sure, Brigitte. Do you know why we ended up with that? I know the decision early in the project was to actually divide it, so we didn't do it all at once. So we had an opportunity to keep the old pay system going of the first launch, but I'm not sure.
There are people in my riding still missing $25,000 worth of pay from the Coast Guard. I've received tweets in the middle of these meetings all the time. You still haven't answered. So who made the recommendation? Who designed the pilot so that it would be so short as to obfuscate the very issues we were trying to identify in the pilot?
Again, I don't think it's not trying to obfuscate.
Do I mean
it's 2 different systems.
We'll try and allow a brief answer in about 45 seconds. Madame Lemay, it seems like you want to chip in here.
Well, I just want to say, I don't think we'll be able to pin to one person for this discussion. I think this is a project that had a lot of people involved in making decisions. But the 3 pay period, one of the big risks of the transformation was that the 300,000 people would not get paid, right? And in terms of the overtime, and the Coast Guard is a very specific group, and we're trying to pay a lot of attention to it because there are real serious issues, and we're very aware of it, working very close with DFO and the Coast Guard on this because it is important. They have a different type of work.
Madame Lemay, I'm going to have to cut you off here because we're limited time, but I think we can suffice it to say the answer is you don't know.
Of the 3 weeks, no.
Thank you. Mr. McCauley, Mr. Clark, 7 minutes.
Mr. Clark will go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The lights are on. The light is on. I'll begin. I'd like to continue in the same vein as Mr. Whalen. Mr. Liddy, you must be well aware that one of the fundamental principles in a parliamentary democracy is ministerial accountability. There are 2 systems, ministerial accountability. In the United States, it's the accountability of officials. I prefer our systems because we want to make ministers responsible for decisions rather than their officials. But when you say in that you decided it was not necessary to inform the minister about the Gardner report, don't you believe that in making that decision with your advisors and with Ms. Lemay, you did in so doing make it very difficult for the minister to exercise ministerial responsibility and accountability on behalf of Canadians. We received a great many opinions. We had 2 reports, in fact 3. There were many comments by departments and clients. We really received a great many opinions on what to do, and we decided to go ahead with the project with the opinions we had received from all partners and stakeholders. We believed, although now it's clear that
And we've lived through those results. I have a large numbers of public service employees, and for that I apologize personally. It's deeply upsetting to them, and I wish we could have done things differently now, but that's in hindsight. At the time, we felt that we had made the right decision to move forward, taking into effect all of the advice. And it found its way, all of the advice finds its way into a deck where we informed the minister of the decisions that we were making going forward.
Je comprends, mais merci de votre déclaration. En tout cas, moi...
I understand, and thank you for your statements. I'll say in conclusion that regardless of whether the report was positive or negative, the minister should have seen it in order to make a well-considered, enlightened decision.
What else, the backlog? I recall, I think it was July, we were discussing the backlog and how 20,000 or 40,000 was a huge surprise, like caught everyone by surprise in your department. Was it, refresh my memory, was it 40,000 the department was not aware of, or aware of the 20 and then the other 20? Because I recall asking, how did we not possibly know?
There was 20 of backlog just at the last minute, and there was 20 of transactions that were sent to us after that were pre-Phoenix.
Okay. And these 20, I recall you saying earlier, and we've seen in your press announcements that some of the outstanding backlog is still stuff from a year or 2 years ago, the more difficult ones. How many of the outstanding ones are from the old system 2 years ago?
So are you talking about from the 15,000 employees?
Yeah, well, there was, I think they exist, backlog as we understand it, there, I think we said there's about 15,000 left to clear.
So of those, what
and
I
you
can...
said a lot of those are pre-existing. Yeah.
So what I can tell you is the analysis we did is all of the transaction for the 82,000 employees, that seems like a number, 82% of those were actually pre-Phoenix. So of the whole... So am I answering your question?
No, not really, but I'll move on. The sake of argument, we did not have a backlog. We entered Phoenix day one, clear that someone thought I had to inform you that there was this backlog. Would we be in this position right now? Like, how much of it is because of the outstanding backlog that you were not aware of?
Well, the backlog did contribute to it, but I would say that because we didn't have the capacity, like the compensation advisor, we didn't have those to mitigate. We had to go out and hire, and the learning curve, the change management. That would be, for me, the 3 elements.
Yeah, well, we saw in the Gartner report that clearly the training wasn't there. We didn't have the backup plan, but it gets back to, again, we saw PSAC brought up issues in January. We brought it up in committee in February and March, and everything was, you know, rainbows and unicorns. In committee, PSAC had a completely different, you know, idea of what the problems were, but we still went ahead with that. If we knew we were short of these 700,000 bodies, the numbers change depending on who you talk to on that side, but if we knew that this was going to be a problem, why, again, did we go ahead?
So I joined on April 11th, so right in the middle of the two.
I would assume that you would have asked this question, though.
But I can tell you that at the time, one of the things that was very clear is that there was a lot of stress on the system because these compensation advisors it wasn't decided the day before they were going to leave. Like I said, notice were issues back in 2014, so people had started leaving. So when you balance all the risks, my assumption, and don't want to put words in the mouth of my colleagues, but you balance the risk, and the system was without compensation advisors for a long time. Departments were saying we're gonna have a hard time retaining these people. So all of that, in terms of being able to push back, were also factors that were included in the decision.
I'm sure, Mata, just very quickly, the backlog because of this 40,000 was a surprise and hidden, whether mistake, incompetence, maliciously hidden before I move ahead. Is there another 40,000 perhaps hidden from the department?
So I don't think anybody tried maliciously to do anything in this, right?
However,
but
it happened. It did happen. Is there another 20,000 that we're not aware of?
So
that
this
we weren't
is
aware
why
of the original?
this is why we're engaging with the departments and our employees, but particularly the departments, to talk about our plan, our way forward, our capacity to make sure that we have everything at Miramichi, and that our estimate of the 83 or 80 to 85,000 transaction amount is the right one.
Our attempt to give Mr. Weir about 2 minutes. I'll have to cut you off there.
No problem. Thanks very much. So there have been major problems with efforts to centralize payroll and IT systems across the federal government, yet the government does want to plow ahead with some similar initiatives. I wonder whether the difficulties with Phoenix and shared services should be giving the government more pause about these transformation projects.
I'll do a 2 seconds on that one. Like I said earlier, I think the key thing is to learn from the experiences that we have. And I can assure you that we are learning collectively, the community of deputy ministers. I mean, this is something that we're looking at to make sure that we learn from these projects.
But is one of the lessons to slow down on these things and be much more diligent and careful?
One of the big lessons is to think of change management when you start and think of the impact on the people. And again, to set it up so that you have the accountability and the right governance.
I would only add that it's important to get all the feedback you can, and this is the opportunity that we're having with the reset of shared services transformation plan. We've taken the time to consult broadly, talk to client departments, talk to Canadians, talk to our employees, the bargaining agents. We're benefiting from other expert outside consultancy advice, and that all factors in a way that our predecessors did not have the chance to take advantage of.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, as you know, it's 6 p.m. and we are cutting things short by about a half an hour. So Madame Lemay, Mr. Parker, and all of you as our witnesses, thank you for coming. However, I would ask that if our committee members have additional questions that they didn't have enough time to ask you because of the truncated version, you will, I assume, allow them to give these written questions directly to you, and you'll respond in kind to our clerk. Specifically, Mr. Whalen had asked a series of questions about who made a decision on the three pay period test. And I would ask that if, even though your answer was you're not sure or you don't know, you try and undertake to find out exactly who did that and then respond as if it was a written question to accommodate Mr. Whalen's concerns. Thank you all for your attendance here. We are adjourned.
Right on time.